And so Mason's right, being in constant prayer, to me, it's just conversation. Realizing that I'm not in control, which was very hard, and just trusting in him fully to know that he will take care of me. Doesn't mean bad things aren't going to happen, but he will be there to support me.
Welcome, everyone, to our 92nd podcast, Renew Your Mind. With us today is Senior Pastor Paul Gruenberg, and we have Family and Youth Director Jeremy Touroo. We have two guests with us today. We have Mason Buckingham, and we have Michele G. Say your last name.
Gianino.
Thank you. And last podcast, we heard some testimonies from Mason. And this podcast, we're going to ask some questions of Michele so she can share some of her experiences as well. Our topic for May has been, well, April and May has been the power of prayer. April was a little more tactical, but May we're hearing different testimonies and how the power of prayer have led people differently, or they've experienced different things. So welcome. And Michele, I will ask you, I guess the first question is, who taught you how to pray?
My mom and my aunts, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I remember staying at my Aunt Linda's house, and one of my cousins was sick, and it was the first time I actually saw somebody lay hands on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
They're Catholic, but they said, let's surround Donnie, and we prayed over her. She got better. Just church family, going to church camp.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of people that have influenced me in prayer. I remember as a kid, though, my mom and dad were in a marriage encounters or something. They had to light a candle, and it was on top of the refrigerator, and we asked my mom, what are you lighting this candle for every day? And she said to remind us to pray for certain people, and I was like, that was a good reminder.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder. And that was as a child?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess we could go, can you think of, I'll ask you 3 questions and then you can pick which one you want to answer. Wondering, what might be a memorable experience that you would like to share with us, or when did you ask for a prayer, or maybe when did you told us about how you prayed for someone, but something memorable come to mind?
I remember specifically praying for my brother when I was in 8th grade, that him and his friends were getting into the wrong crowd of people and into the wrong kind of stuff, and I was worried about him. And I remember telling my neighbor friend that I was worried about our brothers, and all I knew to do was to pray. And much later in our lives, my brother was in the Marines and was in a really bad car accident, which should have killed him. He broke his back and his jaw and stuff. And I knew that his guardian angel or whatever was with him and saved him, because it was a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time I really remember asking God to please protect him, because there was nothing more I could do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then later in my life, when I went through my divorce, leaning on God a lot to help comfort me and give me the answers when I was feeling anxious and worried about my children and how that was going to affect my life. And I can tell you honestly, without the grace of God, I would probably have committed suicide. Or I don't know if I'd commit suicide, but it was without him, I just don't know how I would have stood upright.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, in my 20s especially, Reverend Pettis was a minister here at the Methodist Church, helped lead me a lot. And my church family just really surrounded me and prayed with me. And that just, I know he's my friend, and it gave me comfort. Nothing, it doesn't say that we're not supposed to have bad things or trials and stuff that we go through, but knowing God's there to give us strength is what helps get me through my life. And so Mason's right, being in constant prayer, to me, it's just conversation. Realizing that I'm not in control, which was very hard, that I can't control the situations, and just trusting in him fully to know that he will take care of me. It doesn't mean bad things aren't going to happen, but he will be there to support me.
Those are wonderful, Michele. Thank you. And you had more than one, I just want to note. I mean, many. That's amazing.
You see, when you feel that calmness come over you, you know that he's listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom said to me one time when I was going through my divorce, and it was a custody issue, and I couldn't sleep. And I said, I was just worrying all night and thinking of every worst scenario that I could possibly think of. And I called her in the middle of the night and said, I can't sleep. And she said, you need to give this to God and ask him to please let me go to sleep. It was immediate. I mean, I put my head, I was like, I was out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, this is real.
Yeah.
And I know he's real. He will help save us.
Okay. Thank you, Michele.
It was interesting, Michele. You said there was nothing more I could do about it in regard to one particular incident, and I think it's oftentimes for people there's nothing more I can do about it, and then we hand it over to God instead of giving it to God right away. Not that your particular instance was anything more astounding than anyone else's, but that we do not, as a regular habit, give things over to God immediately. We wait until we reach our ends point, the end of the rope, whatever you want to call it, and then we're like throwing up our hands in the air. God, what else can I do about it? And then we talk to him.
Yeah, and we're all guilty of that to some degree.
Yeah.
I know I am. Even with smaller things, searching to the answer about something or a decision to make, you could spend a lot of time doing that searching on your own, even talking to other people, and then it'll dawn on me, oh, I haven't even asked God about this yet. Maybe I should do that first. And so it's, kind of our human nature to, in some ways, to not do that. But
I think we have to concentrate more on God in our lives and in the world today. A lot of our Christianity and our attention is 2,000 years old. I mean, we talk about the Bible and its old history, and sometimes we don't touch base with, like Michele said, about the miracles that are happening in our world, in our lives today.
Right.
And that's the blessing of small groups and of hearing from each other, because you hear about these things. You hear about miracles that are happening. And I just read a book by Lee Strobel about miracles. And it's amazing about the miracles that are happening around the world today, now.
Right.
God in our lives now.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of times we concentrate on what happened 2,000 years ago, which we have to lean on and have to have as a foundation for. But it's only powerful when it happens today.
Right.
Yeah, we're quick to gloss over
Yeah,
and not even recognize the miracles that happen today.
we're afraid that somebody's going to think we're crazy or something. And I read that book and right away I'm praying for a miracle with my wife. And I didn't get it, but maybe I did.
Right.
Right.
Because I don't know what was in store for her had she survived.
Right.
Right.
God does.
That's right.
And so those things are happening in our world today, and I think we need to focus on a lot of that.
Right. And, and going back to what Pastor Paul was saying about going to him last, like he's our last resort, that prayer about my brother, I was a kid. And so I think that when you're a child, it's much easier to hand it over to him because we don't have the stress of the world on us as an adult. And I think as adults, we were taught at a very young age, you can do this by yourself. We're to be independent and
Well, that's what we raise our kids to do. That's the pinnacle of a parent, is getting their kids to be independent, to rely on themselves, to do the things that they need to do so that they can function in the world today. And then we misread prayer on that, and we're not teaching our kids to be totally dependent on God. We're telling them to be dependent on themselves. You got to make a living. You got to pay your bills, those kinds of things. But we don't. we don't talk in terms of dependence on God. We need to be dependent on God.
Yeah, and we need to model that for our families, for our children as well. They need to see us depending on God in prayer and going to God first. And that's a way of leading them to do the same.
Right. And I think a lot of people too have, I don't know if it's a misconception. In my opinion, it is a misconception when somebody has given up on God because their life isn't good. Or first off, we're here on earth and not heaven. And it doesn't mean that he didn't answer our prayers. It's just not the way we wanted to answer. You can't control him. And I learned that at a very young age in my 20s and 30s, that I can be praying to change somebody's personality or take care of them. That's ridiculous. I'm not God and I can't control him. And,
And
I
that
needed
doesn't
to be
go-
silent and listen to him. Like you said, we need to stop and listen and to see the small things that he is doing for us. Sometimes I'm walking down the hall in the church and thinking, hey, he answered that prayer. I've been praying really hard for this. And yes, it's been answered. Not my way, but
Or not my will.
not my will. Is right.
That responsibility doesn't go away because your kids grew up.
No.
I have a congregation of 10.
Yes.
Those are grandchildren. And I see as my challenge to communicate with them all the time and push it, because lots of times they're not, there to respond. And they don't want to respond. But we do a weekly connection with all of them and trying to keep that before them. So you still have the responsibility. And although your kids get older, doesn't mean they get any smarter. Well, I shouldn't say that.
Well, Mason.
Whatever.
Hopefully the kids aren't listening.
Oh, they're listening now. What can I say? Yeah, well, you heard from them at Jan's funeral, so you probably know what I mean. But
Well, one quick question and then we'll wrap it up. But what are, from each of anybody at the table, what's one way you use to better listen to God?
I know for me, I have to be in a quiet place and minimize distractions.
Okay.
The scriptures speak of it as a still small voice, and I found that to be true. So it's helpful to get alone in the quiet for me.
you have to put yourself in the position to hear. And the position is to hear is when we're reading the book, the Bible.
Oh, that's another way.
The position is when you're with your small group. It's the time that you can spend alone with people that you trust and that you know are leading in the right direction. I really think God speaks to me through other people, and He speaks to me through the written word. And if you don't spend time in those things,
Right.
you don't get the word, and you're not prepared. My note to my kids this week was, be prepared, because your faith is going to get challenged. And your first job is to recognize it when it's challenged. And the second choice is, what are you going to do about it when you hear it
Right.
and what you see it? And I think it's all of our responsibility is to keep that in front of the younger generation, because they are facing a lot more challenges than we have, as Jeremy knows, what the young people are. It's tough.
Yeah.
And we need to keep that in front of them.
Okay.
I'm with Jeremy, just quiet. And even when I'm praying to him, to stop talking to him and just be quiet. Like, clear my head, stop worrying, and just try to hear what he's trying to tell me. I don't even turn my radio on in my car for this very reason, just so that I can be still for a second and see what he's trying to tell me to do.
Okay.
And I would say for me, there are some prayer practices that we're unaccustomed to, that were practiced thousands of years ago, like a prayer labyrinth, or some type of a prayer walk, which puts us in a place where we're not distracted by the things that we're normally distracted by. I've talked with hunters who say, when I go out hunting, that's my prayer time. And then, of course, I'm like, how many times do you go hunting?
November 15th.
November
That's my
15th,
prayer
right?
day.
One
It's
day.
the only day of the year.
But
You need
there
to
are,
ask the wives.
yeah, there are those practice. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably when they're praying for their husbands, or I should say, praying for the hunters, because there are a lot of women that hunt.
True.
But that idea of getting quiet before God, I think the posture of being on your knees is an important one. You know, that, what do we say to our kids? Bow your head, close your eyes, fold your hands. And that puts you into a position of stillness. Be still and know that I am God. And so whatever way that happens for you, you know, Michelle turns off the radio. I'll listen to classical music because there's no words to it. And that way I'm not singing along with whatever music I'm listening to. But that posture, we were singing yesterday in the contemporary music about raising your hands or bowing your head. And in my mind's eye, you know, I'm not going to, so maybe God is speaking to me to bow my head physically, and, you know, you resist a little bit, but I do in my mind's eye do those things when we're singing. Because if I'm going to fully embrace it, right?
Yeah.
I might as well do it.
Yeah.
It was like signing up for the prayer vigil on Ash Wednesday. The first time I had to go into the prayer vigil, and you're supposed to sit there for a half hour and meditate. It was awful. I was thinking, oh my gosh, I still have 20 minutes to go. And now I'm thinking, it's done already. I still have lots to say.
No, that's a good point. I mean, it's where you're at with your practice, right, of doing that. So.
How about you, Dana? What do you need to do for your prayer time?
For me, it's silence, but right now I'm with the scriptures. That seems to speak to me. But I was glad to hear Mason say through others, because I do hear a lot through others, and I always thought that wasn't the right way. So that's not necessarily true. So,
And we've talked about journaling before too.
And
That's
journaling,
a great
yeah.
practice.
I'm a big journaler too.
That bow your head thing doesn't work when you're driving your car, though.
Yeah,
True.
closing
Don't
your
close
eyes,
your
especially.
eyes.
How many
I
times?
talk to him a lot when I'm driving, but sometimes I talk to the other drivers too, which is not part of my godly life.
I would ignore that, God. I didn't mean to say that to that driver.
Oh, well, on that cheerful
I'm
note.
working on that. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody around this table. We really appreciate it, and we especially appreciate our listeners. If you would like to join us in person, we have a traditional Sunday service at 9 a.m. at the First United Methodist Church in Gaylord, Michigan, and we have a contemporary at 10:45 a.m. You can join us in person, or if you can't make it in person, you can view us via Facebook or YouTube. And you can call us directly with any questions, 989-732-5380, or Google us and find our website. And we have all kinds of great information there as well. So thanks, everybody, for joining today.